From the very beginning, the live-action remake of Snow White seemed like it could go one of two ways, either a massive win or a complete misfire.
The movie that nobody wanted to see, and I mean that seriously, nobody wants to see this movie. Ticket pre-sales are nowhere near what Disney was hoping for. Let's just say if you wanted to buy tickets for the 9 p.m. show tonight, wherever you are in America, you'd be just fine.
Disney has long leaned on its legendary animated library to fuel new film projects, banking on nostalgia and the appeal of modern storytelling. But once production details began to leak, fans and commentators quickly picked up on signs that something wasn't right.
Now, for Disney, as you probably remember, all of this publicity, the Zegler interviews, the Daily Mail leak, caused a lot of unexpected, for them anyway, pre-production problems. People weren't supposed to see and understand just how unwatchable the new Snow White was going to be. It was supposed to be, kind of a surprise, but now there was no hiding.
They noticed dramatic departures from the elements that made the original Snow White, released in 1937, a timeless classic. Many feared that the studio's attempt to modernize the tale would stir more backlash than excitement.
And now she's trying to reinvent herself because there's been so much blowback, and you can only imagine the studio calls about this woman behind the scene, like, oh my God, we're $242 million in, and our lead actress hates our film, our actors, our storyline.
And by the time the movie finally hit theaters, those fears seemed well-founded. The box office performance was underwhelming, and both professional critics and online voices were harsh in their reactions.
It had the lowest opening, under 50 million, of any of these live-action Disney remakes that they've ever had.
At that time, Disney CEO Bob Iger, who had returned to the company after an earlier retirement, was already dealing with a long list of challenges. Attendance at Disney's theme parks wasn't what it used to be. Some streaming ventures were losing money, and the studio's creative decisions were drawing louder criticism than ever.
But these guys at Disney, they're not that bright, they're not that smart, and we see that because they can't come up with any new IP.
The Snow White remake landed right in the middle of that storm. With big-name stars Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot attached, Disney likely hoped to recapture the charm of the original while making it resonate with today's audiences. Instead, the film was quickly labeled a box office disaster.
So now, as the movie comes out, the two biggest stars in this movie can't stand each other to the point where they can't be in the same room, which forced Disney, in their infinite wisdom, to cut back on doing a formal premiere.
A surprising downfall for a story that once defined Disney's golden age of animation. The backlash largely centered on how drastically the film reimagined core characters and story elements.
The latest victim of really bad ideas is finally here. The magical Disney DEI woke equity version of the 1937 classic Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. But because the word dwarves is now apparently controversial, Disney took that part out of the movie altogether. And now the movie is just called Snow White, which would be like Disney taking lions out of Lion King or mermaids out of The Little Mermaid.
While some viewers welcome bold reimaginings, many felt this version veered too far from the fairy tale's identity. Changes to the dwarfs, Snow White's personality, and even the setting left longtime fans feeling alienated or outright upset.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that
she's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true.
On top of that, the film didn't impress from a technical standpoint either. Critics called out the uninspired direction, flat cinematography, and an overall sense that the production didn't quite know what it wanted to be. At the heart of the controversy stood Rachel Zegler. Although she had already gained recognition through prominent roles in earlier films, her involvement in Snow White placed her under a level of scrutiny she may not have faced before.
I know this point has been made, but this truly is the worst casting, maybe, in the history of the film industry.
The scale of the backlash appeared to surprise everyone, leading to a ripple effect on Zegler's career. Several insiders claimed that Disney quietly removed her from upcoming projects, including a voice role in the upcoming Toy Story 5, where she had reportedly been listed under the codename Spiral. There was also speculation that she had initially joined a reboot of Pirates of the Caribbean, only to be dropped before the project gained any real momentum. And even though that reboot had seemed shaky from the beginning, Zegler's sudden departure generated headlines fans and fueled online debate over whether the film would be scrapped or reworked yet again.
Disney is having its own problems. They're finally releasing the latest adaptation of Snow White, but they're scaling back the Hollywood premiere of the film. Kinsey, why is that?
Because Rachel Zegler is a PR nightmare.
She's a PR nightmare. I don't know how anyone would hire her.
Amid this storm, Zegler's own public comments only fueled the growing backlash. During the actors' strike, she voiced the opinion that performers should be compensated each time someone streamed the film on Disney+.
I say, if I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed on.
The idea was met with significant backlash, with many labeling it unrealistic or entitled, particularly since traditional Hollywood norms have never operated on such a strict pay-per-click basis.
No one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie.
But you don't seemingly like your own character, so she comes off as an insufferable, whiny brat.
While plenty of people agreed that the entertainment industry needs to rethink how it handles payments in the streaming era, Zegler's suggestion was widely viewed as overly simplistic or out of touch with how the system works. She also came under fire for mentioning that she had to wear the Snow White costume for up to 16 or 18 hours a day. While few would deny that such schedules are grueling, experienced actors and crew members were quick to point out that these kinds of demands are fairly standard in large-scale productions, especially when extensive wardrobe, makeup, and hairstyling are involved. Instead of generating sympathy, her remarks gave some the impression that she may not yet fully grasp the day-to-day realities of the industry, even with major roles already under her belt.
This is someone who is as entitled as, I don't need your business.
And if you disagree with this sentiment, I don't need your business. Thanks.
You know what? Maybe Disney does. Maybe you're a tool, you're a pawn in this film. You didn't write it. You didn't direct it. You have nothing to do with the creation of Snow White. Right. You should shut up and do the job.
To make things even worse, Zegler's early defense of the film came across to many as a jab at earlier versions of the Snow White story. Devoted fans of the Disney classic from 1937 took offense when she called the new interpretation the best and bravest portrayal of the character, viewing it as a dig at a film that helped shape Disney's identity. Others felt that her comments also dismissed other notable versions of the tale, including the original Brothers Grimm folktale, the darker reimagining starring Kristen Stewart, and the comedic spin Mirror Mirror with Lily Collins.
Rachel is literally the star of a Disney movie, and she acts like she's some sort of victim, and that's the sort of mentality that is just poisoning people's minds. Like, she acts like her life is so bad.
I truly do believe that. There's something wrong with her. She's disturbed, she's unhappy, and she thinks it's about feminism and the patriarchy and about abortion, but the reality is she's just not stable, like the majority of people in Hollywood. They're just not stable human beings.
The takeaway for many was that Zegler seemed to have a narrow perspective centered only on her own role, which added fuel to the already growing resentment surrounding the production. As the controversy expanded, whispers began circulating that other studios, not just Disney, were stepping back from working with her. Blumhouse Productions was rumored to have removed her from a planned horror trilogy, and there was speculation that Warner Brothers had dropped her from a political thriller where she was slated for a key supporting part. Online conversations painted her as being fired from Hollywood, though the truth is likely more complicated.
Sweetie, you're being paid $25 million and you're on TV saying your bosses suck. So Rachel Zegler, maybe keep your mouth shut.
Projects in the film industry often fall apart for a range of reasons, from budget constraints to creative shifts. But when multiple setbacks happen in a short span, it creates the impression that an actor has become too controversial to hire without risk.
I don't really care what happens with this movie. I really hope her career is pretty much over. I'd be thrilled to see that. I can't imagine. I mean, Christian, you tell me. But is she not seen as box office poison now because of all of her antics?
It's kind of a mixed track record. She's still fairly young. Her West Side Story debut was not a hit, and that was a Spielberg movie, so that was kind of surprised. But if you're a studio, if you're a director, if you're a casting director, you've got to think twice or three times before hiring her. Listen, she's talented, she's attractive, she's got skill, but there are a lot of actresses in Hollywood who bring all that to the table and are not going to absolutely sabotage your work. She was plucked out of obscurity by Steven Spielberg. All you say is thank you, Mr. Spielberg, and you keep saying that for the next 50 years.
Commentators, especially on social media and YouTube, began placing Zegler into a broader pattern. They pointed out that other celebrities, like Robert De Niro, Alec Baldwin and George Clooney had all faced public backlash for their outspoken views or controversial statements. Julia Roberts and Meghan Markle were also mentioned as high-profile figures who had split public opinion. But the question remained, could Rachel Zegler, still early in her career and with a relatively short list of credits, endure the same level of scrutiny without long-term harm to her future prospects? In the background, Disney was doing what it could to steady the ship. Bob Iger, typically known for his sharp instincts when it comes to brand management, found himself in a difficult spot. While Disney had weathered criticism before, the backlash to Snow White felt unusually intense, almost as if it had become a lightning rod for frustrations over the company's broader direction.
But these guys at Disney, they're not that bright, they're not that smart, and we see that because they can't come up with any new IP. Why not write some new movies? You guys sit around, you have billions of dollars, they keep going back and rewriting the classic.
Despite public reassurances that the film would gain traction and that it offered more depth than its critics gave it credit for, the numbers and online response told a very different story. Rachel Zegler made efforts to promote the film on social media, referring to it as the #1 movie in the world. But many online viewers quickly challenged that claim, pointing to actual ticket sale numbers that told a very different story. Adding to the growing skepticism was the film's marketing campaign, which soon became the target of ridicule. Television spots trying to spotlight humorous scenes or depict the dwarfs in lighthearted ways clashed with the negativity already surrounding the movie. One particularly awkward ad featured Dopey excitedly declaring that people were rushing to theaters, while the dwarfs themselves shuffled forward at a snail's pace. Online critics wasted no time labeling these promos as cringeworthy and tone-deaf, suggesting Disney was grasping at straws in a failed attempt to attract viewers.
Disney, despite losing over $1 billion on their last 4 movies, as they continue to shove woke politics into people's faces who just want to go to the movie, laugh, cry, and go home. Look, people don't want to be lectured when they're watching a movie, and they certainly don't want to be told that they're bad people. But that's what Disney continues to do.
For longtime Disney fans, the entire situation felt unsettling. The studio, known for its polished, family-friendly image and its ability to present films in a carefully managed light, suddenly looked exposed, maybe even lost. Snow White had come to represent deeper issues facing the brand, concerns that storytelling had taken a backseat to messaging, that casting choices were being made without fully considering public perception, and that treasured stories were being reshaped in ways that clashed with why people loved them in the first place. Still, Rachel Zegler stood her ground. She continued to praise the film and her portrayal, emphasizing how it brought a bold, modern twist to a character many considered sacred. But instead of softening the criticism, her confidence often intensified it.
Now, one thing that is already universally known at this point by the general public is the fact that Disney is in full-on damage control mode.
The reason we had Rachel Zegler on the docket is she's an asshole.
Rachel Zegler is extraordinarily woke, but she's woke in a way that's quite deranged.
Fans who cherished the original animated classic, or who had embraced other live-action renditions, felt as if their emotional connection to the story was being dismissed. Rather than honoring the legacy of previous versions, Zegler's remarks were seen by some as an attempt to replace them entirely, creating further distance between the film and its potential audience. Perhaps one of the biggest takeaways from this saga is just how quickly things can shift in Hollywood. A rising star can go from celebrated newcomer to the face of a failed blockbuster almost overnight. In Snow White's case, it seemed clear that Disney had placed its hopes on Zegler's youthful charm, acting talent, and strong social media presence to win over a new generation. But when the film failed to connect, and when Zegler's public persona became a lightning rod for criticism, she became, fairly or not, a cautionary tale of how quickly favor can fade when a major release stumbles.
Every Disney movie is about a woman waiting for a man, okay? Sleeping Beauty, she is comatose until a man comes to kiss her and wake her up. Rapunzel, she's up in a tower, taking biotin, hair vitamins, waiting for a man. This is what these women are
Cinderella.
doing. Is it the best? Yes, Cinderella. Is this the best message to send to young girls? No, but you don't have to rewrite and rework the classics. Come up with something new, you guys.
There's also a broader conversation to be had about what the Snow White situation reveals about shifts happening across the entertainment industry. The rise of streaming has blurred traditional revenue models, sparking intense discussions about how to fairly compensate compensate actors, writers, and other creatives. Fan communities have grown more vocal and influential, using social media to shape narratives in real time. Meanwhile, studios are constantly trying to walk the line between honoring beloved stories and updating them for modern audiences. When that balance is missed, reactions can be swift and intense, ranging from viral backlash to full-blown boycotts. Those who saw the film described it as both overly polished and oddly clumsy, as if the filmmakers were torn between staying true to tradition and injecting something fresh. The result, according to critics, was a confused final product. Some parts clung to the familiar Disney blueprint, while others dipped into modern themes in ways that felt shallow or underdeveloped. Instead of successfully blending the old with the new, Snow White ended up pleasing neither the devoted fans of the classic nor those who were hoping for a bold reimagining. From a business perspective, Disney counts on each major release to be more than just a movie. It's meant to spark merchandise sales, fuel interest in theme park attractions, launch sequels, and expand the brand across platforms.
This movie's cost them $200 million and counting, and instead of America being excited to take their families, I've got kids, we'd normally be excited to go see the remake of Bashful, Doc, Dopey, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, and Sneezy. Disney is looking at another woke flop with magical creatures instead of dwarves in a movie about 7 dwarves.
But when a film stumbles right out of the gate and generates only lukewarm word of mouth, that entire ecosystem is at risk. Executives are then forced to shift focus from capitalizing on success to limiting the fallout, both financial and reputational. While streaming might give some underperforming films a second life, the early wave of audience feedback is often what shapes the broader narrative. And if that wave is largely negative, it becomes incredibly difficult to recover momentum. Rachel Zegler's own presence online likely intensified the storm. In today's landscape, stars are expected to engage directly with fans, something actors in the golden age of Hollywood never had to contend with. Platforms like Twitter and Instagram offer a sense of authenticity, but also open the door to unfiltered opinions that can backfire quickly. While audiences often appreciate honest communication, even one misstep can reinforce a negative perception. If a performer is already seen as dismissive or out of touch, further commentary, no matter the intention, can cement that image instead of repairing it. Adding to the intensity of the situation is the constant chatter from the online commentary world. YouTubers, entertainment bloggers, and everyday observers who eagerly analyze every new development. Once a negative narrative begins to take shape, each additional quote, rumor, or misstep only serves to reinforce it, often drowning out any positive aspects the film might have offered.
She told Variety that I'm only responsible for what I feel, and then I'm responsible for how I act upon it, which makes no sense at all.
In the case of Snow White, what began as genuine excitement gradually turned into widespread disillusionment. The spotlight moved away from the film itself and instead fixated on how Disney and its lead actress responded to the criticism. For Disney, the situation presents a serious challenge. Reimagining beloved classics has become a key part of the company's strategy, but a string of underwhelming results in that area could start to backfire. Some live-action remakes have been successful, but others have fallen flat or sparked backlash of their own. After the reception Snow White received, Disney may need to rethink how aggressively it wants to rework cherished stories. The backlash around this film serves as a clear signal. Audiences won't accept every update at face value, especially if they sense the project lacks heart or feels driven more by strategy than by genuine creativity.
We've already covered how Rachel Zegler is a terrible choice for Snow White. Nothing about her says Snow White, and that's even leaving aside the fact that she openly detests the story, as she's said many times during this disastrous PR campaign. But Gal Gadot, who plays the Queen, the first problem is that she's the evil queen. The evil queen is supposed to be envious of Snow White's beauty, and that is just not believable. It is just not, even in a movie with magical mirrors and dwarves and all that, in a fairy tale, that strains my ability to suspend disbelief. I cannot buy that Gal Gadot is angry that she's not as beautiful as Rachel Zegler. I cannot buy that.
Bob Iger is no stranger to steering Disney through stormy waters. He was at the helm when the company acquired Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm, turning them into major financial powerhouses. But this current period brings fresh challenges. The streaming landscape is highly competitive, economic concerns are influencing how people spend their money, and social media can amplify outrage at an unprecedented rate. Even a brand as deeply entrenched in pop culture as Disney can stumble when caught in the crossfire of cultural debate. And Snow White became a perfect case study in how quickly things can unravel. As for Rachel Zegler, her path forward remains unclear.
I don't really care what happens with this movie. I really hope her career is pretty much over. I'd be thrilled to see that. I can't imagine. I mean, Christian, you tell me. But is she not seen as box office poison now because of all of her antics?
You know, it's kind of a mixed track record. She's still fairly young. Her West Side Story debut was not a hit, and that was a Spielberg movie, so that was kind of a surprise. But if you're a studio, if you're a director, if you're a casting director, you've got to think twice or three times before hiring her. Listen, she's talented, she's attractive, she's got skill, but there are a lot of actresses in Hollywood who bring all that to the table and are not going to absolutely sabotage your work. She was plucked out of obscurity by Steven Spielberg. All you say is thank you, Mr. Spielberg, and you keep saying that for the next 50 years.
She had generated excitement for her performance in West Side Story, where she showed off strong vocal ability and natural screen charisma. But the rapid string of removals, like the reported loss of her role in Blumhouse's horror trilogy and other rumored exits, threatens to eclipse those earlier achievements. Of course, Hollywood has a long history of giving second chances to actors who can reinvent themselves or deliver a breakout performance. Whether Zegler gets that chance may depend on how effectively she can rebuild trust with studios and reshape the public's perception of her. Her firm stance on certain issues could either work in her favor or backfire, depending on how public sentiment evolves. If audiences come to see her as a fearless advocate for fair pay and inclusive storytelling, she might gain a loyal following in some circles. But if she continues to come across as combative or uninformed about the inner workings of her own profession, there's a risk she'll be branded as entitled, a perception that can be extremely difficult to reverse once it takes hold. All of these threads, Disney's public image, Bob Iger's leadership decisions, shifting revenue models in the age of streaming, Rachel Zegler's career, and the challenges of updating a classic have converged in what's now widely viewed as the Snow White debacle. It's unlikely to fade from memory anytime soon. The situation stands as a cautionary tale about the risks of straying too far from a story that holds deep emotional meaning for generations of fans, and about underestimating the power of that fan base to make or break a release. It also highlights the fine line between speaking openly and speaking wisely, especially when millions of dollars and a global brand's identity hang in the balance. In the meantime, many viewers have returned to earlier interpretations of the story, whether revisiting the original film from 1937 or seeking out more faithful live-action versions, instead of embracing the newest take. For Disney, this has triggered not only a reassessment of the Snow White project itself, but potentially a broader reconsideration of how it approaches its ongoing lineup of reboots and reimaginings. While the company searches for a path forward, fans are left wondering if the hard lessons learned from this controversy will lead to better outcomes in the future, or if Disney will continue to push out reimaginings that feel disconnected from the heart of what made the originals special. If Rachel Zegler does manage to stage a comeback, it could be a powerful example of Hollywood's ability to forgive and reinvent. On the other hand, if her star continues to dim, her career might end up being grouped with those who lost momentum after becoming mired in too many controversies. Either way, both her path and Disney's response will be watched closely by industry insiders and fans alike, as the entertainment world continues to adapt to a landscape shaped by instant fan reactions, constant social media scrutiny, and evolving business realities. For now, Snow White stands as a pivotal moment in Disney's long timeline, a rare misstep that opened the door to conversations about creative freedom, respect for original material, working conditions, fair compensation, and the often tense relationship between powerful studios and the individuals they spotlight. Even if it eventually becomes just another chapter in the company's massive storybook, it will likely remain a striking reminder of what can happen when audience trust is underestimated. And whether or not one found redeeming elements in the final product, the lessons from this episode may very well influence how Disney handles future live-action ventures, and how stars like Rachel Zegler navigate the high-stakes world of modern celebrity.